This is All India Radio. In the program Spotlight, we now bring you a discussion on India's presidential declaration on maritime security at UN Security Council. The participants are Yogendra Kumar, former ambassador, and Simran Sodhi, journalist.
Today we are discussing Prime Minister Narendra Modi chairing the United Nations Security Council high-level open debate on enhancing maritime security, a case for international cooperation. And the Prime Minister also made some very pointed remarks on this, and we made the case for international cooperation in this. There were other heads of states, including the Russian President Vladimir Putin, the President of Kenya, and the Premier of Vietnam in attendance. Ambassador Kumar, when you see the Prime Minister's address on this very important issue in the UNSC, how do you assess its global impact?
I think it is the right time to use the high-level forum like the UN Security Council to actually focus attention on maritime security. Because for a variety of reasons. One, of course, is that, in fact, the entire global economy is working on maritime trade. So if unnecessary disputes are arising, for example, between countries or because of claims made by certain countries, in that case, the flow of maritime trade, the growth of maritime trade is bound to be impeded or obstructed and therefore has global implications. The other thing, of course, is that apart from free flow of trade, we also have the issue of conserving and properly using the resources of the oceans. And there are also issues which actually affect the prosperity and stability of states. I mean, in terms of exclusive economic zones, illegal fishing, then a whole lot of other criminal activities which take place. And even more importantly, you have the impact of climate change, which is actually affecting the temperature of the oceans. So the ocean warming is again an important fact that just recently the UNFCCC report which has come out actually mentions that the ocean warming actually is something which is a direct threat to the security of countries and communities. So whether it's in terms of sea level rise, for example, or the fact that the ocean biodiversity, the ocean resources are being diminished because of the impact of the rising sea temperature, all that actually has an effect. So also it has the monsoons. I mean, the monsoon, the weather, the climate, all these are impacted by that. So therefore, all that actually goes into what you call maritime security. And therefore, it's very important that global attention is actually focused on that.
Master Kumar, we saw that the Prime Minister outlined a 5-principle framework for the debate. The first was removing barriers to maritime trade. In this context, the PM highlighted Sagar, security and growth for all in the region, which is the 2015 Indian Framework for Regional Maritime Security. And the Prime Minister said that for free maritime trade, it is also necessary that we fully respect rights of the seafarers of other countries. The second point that the Prime Minister made, he said that maritime disputes should be resolved peacefully and in accordance with international law. He went on to add that this was extremely important for promoting mutual trust and confidence and ensuring global peace and stability. Ambassador Kumar, when we see the Prime Minister's significant statements on resolving things in accordance with international law, and we also look at the backdrop and we see the aggressive behavior by China in the South China Sea, do you feel that this is also India somewhere indirectly reaching out to China about its past aggressive behavior?
The fact that maritime trade is important, the fact that proper exploitation of ocean resources is important. I mean, these are all part of the sustainable development goals of the United Nations. The fact that the global warming actually has to be tackled by the international community as a whole. In an environment like this, to raise petty issues, petty disputes on grounds of national security and national sovereignty and so on and so forth, which actually are not sustainable. So you find that the Chinese reaction when the entire, let's say, international community in the form of the UN Security Council, United Nations actually focus on that, for them to have actually said that, you should not be talking about South China Sea, or you should not be talking about this, or you should not be talking about that. And then to actually, at the level of the Prime Minister, who's actually a national leader, the Chinese representative was actually a deputy ambassador. Whereas you had the Russian president, you had the Kenyan president, and you had Vietnamese Prime Minister, and people of that stature and standing, who are international leaders in their status, to send actually somebody who is actually a deputy ambassador, it showed that the Chinese actually feel that says something about which they have to be defensive about. And therefore, in a way, I would only say that I hope they get the message from this, that they need to change their attitude to international governance issues, where ultimately how the international governance takes place, how the global challenges are addressed, they will also be affected by that. So to talk like that, or to take that kind of an attitude, I think it doesn't behove a country, which actually aspires to be a global leader.
Ambassador Kumar, we see that the third principle the Prime Minister proposed at Monday's debate was that countries jointly tackle maritime threats from non-state actors and natural disasters. The PM said that India's role in the Indian Ocean has been that of a net security provider. The fourth point he made was that the maritime environment and marine resources needed to be conserved, highlighting pollution from plastic waste and oil spills. And the fifth point that the Prime Minister made called for responsible maritime connectivity, saying a structure was required to boost maritime trade with the development of global norms and standards. Ambassador Kumar, when you see the very detailed points the Prime Minister's call for more responsible maritime connectivity, how do you see the UNSC and the world in general coming together to then put all these points in force?
I think this is again a good point to focus upon, to showcase or to project before the international community. Purpose of connectivity actually is to bring people together, to encourage trade and people-to-people exchanges and enhancement and enrichment of culture of various countries and communities. Now, if at that time a certain approach is being adopted in terms of maritime connectivity, which actually weakens states, whether through debt indebtedness, for example, or actually trying to use these for dual purposes, or, for example, using this as a lever to pressurize countries which already are having internal little bit of some amount of fragility. Let's say a particular policy approach diminishes the national capacities to address all these big challenges and to contribute to global prosperity and for the enrichment of global culture. I think this is actually a point that everybody needs to reflect upon, and we should think about it very seriously, because if the states become fragile or if they become unstable, then you find also the issue of human trafficking, you find issue of criminal networks developing, and also the place where terrorist networks, also the terrorist havens get created. So the point actually is that in one way, an approach which leads to weakening of states, which actually constitute the structure of the global community, in that case it's again counterproductive. So I think it's a very good thing that the Prime Minister focused and brought the international attention that when the uncertainties are so much, because of the global challenges, it is so important that everybody actually adopts a responsible position to handle global challenges together.
Ambassador Kumar, we also saw that Vladimir Putin was the only head of state in the P5 who participated in the discussion, and the Prime Minister said after Mr. Putin's remarks that Russia has always played an important role in global maritime security. It is an important player in global security, safety and prosperity. But we also found that after the Prime Minister, when the US Secretary of State Antony Blinken spoke on Russia in the debate, he had a different take on it, and he pointed and he made a reference to Russia which suggested that there was aggressive actions against Ukraine. And there seems to be a difference of opinion when it comes to Russia between the various members of the UNSC. How important it is for the UNSC then to have these divisions, and do you think this could kind of have an influence on the larger workings, especially when we are discussing topics like maritime security?
Different countries, they take different positions based on the bilateral relationship we have with a particular country that they are actually talking about. But I would actually say that what the Prime Minister said about Russia's global role, I think that is something which is worth pondering and reflecting over, and to understand a country like Russia. Without Russia, you cannot really manage the global affairs well. And the fact that the Russian president joined the discussion at the UN Security Council actually shows the Russian desire to collaborate with India in moving the debate or even moving the world in the direction which actually is for everybody's welfare. So I actually think that the Russian role in this debate which took place, I think is very constructive. President Putin made some very important points in the discussion, and very rightly he said that there is a responsible use of maritime spaces. To me, it appears to be unexceptional. I hope the Chinese pay attention to what the President of Russia actually said in this connection. So I would actually, in a way, let's say, put aside a little bit some of the bilateral kind of thing which takes place in international forums. But the Russian president was present. He made his contribution on a debate on important subjects, show the Russian commitment to actually address these challenges with the rest of the world.
Ambassador Kumar, we see that China was also represented in the debate by its deputy representative to the United Nations. And in his turn to speak, he also made an indirect reference to the Quad, which is the grouping of India, Australia, the United States, and Japan. And he also criticized the formation of what he called exclusive groupings. And he also referred to several instances in which he said the marine life has been affected by the industrial actions of major powers, calling out Japan, for instance, for releasing the radioactive water of the Fukushima nuclear reactors. And he also referred to Mr. Blinken's remarks when he said that the UNSC is not the right platform for a discussion on the South China Sea. So we see China reacting very aggressively to almost every point that was raised in the debate. How do you assess the Chinese response?
China is a permanent member of the UN Security Council. And the fact that the UN Security Council actually is engaged with the larger global task of maritime security, to me it appears that the Chinese actually were somewhat defensive. And they did not make the kind of contribution that was expected of a country of China's stature, because of the fact that China actually, as I said, a permanent member of the UN Security Council, great power. So you would expect that the Chinese would take a debate like this to be more seriously. To say that South China Sea is not a subject, if you're discussing maritime security, why wouldn't talk about South China Sea? You give your point of view, but to be defensive of South China Sea is very strange. I mean, it is almost like saying South China Sea, there's a possessiveness about this as far as the Chinese are concerned. I mean, there's a common area, a common space for everybody to use. I mean, under UNCLOS, every country has the right to use the waterways which are provided by the oceans.
Master Kumar, we also saw that the United Kingdom's Secretary of Defense, Ben Wallace, was present at the meeting. And he said that like India, the UK has a vision for a free, open and secure Indo-Pacific. That is why the United Kingdom's recent integrated review of foreign, security, defense and development policy set out the importance we attach to the Indo-Pacific. Mr. Wallace also added that whatever happens there matters to the world. So we see this emphasis on the Indo-Pacific which has come up in the UNSC, and we have seen a lot of discussion and write-ups that are coming up about the Indo-Pacific. How significant do you think it is that today the Indo-Pacific has become a global issue and it is something that everyone debates and talks about?
I think it is an important issue. First of all, let me just add one more thing. The Indian position is that it should be, that our approach is it should be free, it should be open and inclusive. We are not excluding any other country because as I said, the global waterways, everybody has a right to sustainably use it and to actually contribute to the global welfare. So that is the first point one has to remember. Now, the second point actually is, to me, Prime Minister said so. In Shangri-La speech that he gave in 2018, I think, he made it very clear what our vision of the Indo-Pacific is. And India's position on this has been consistent. Whether it is the Shangri-La speech or the Prime Minister, whether, again, at the East Asia Summit, the Prime Minister talked about the Indo-Pacific Ocean Initiative. He actually talks about as to how the Indo-Pacific Ocean, how they actually can be used sustainably in a manner which is stabilizing, which is not something which is disruptive of the global order and adds to the achievement of sustainable development goals. So I would actually say that the debate on the Indo-Pacific has been unnecessarily twisted. The fact that the two oceans have close connectivity is a very well-known fact. What happens in the ocean affects the Pacific. There's something which is evident to everybody who actually follows the developments taking place. To somehow to say that it is to direct it to somebody else or that it is exclusive, well, I just say please read Prime Minister Shangri-La's speech.
We will continue to follow the United Nations Security Council meetings and the developments, because this is also the month when India holds a month-long presidency in the UNSC, and we will follow the discussions there throughout the month. For today's discussion, we leave it with these comments. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much.
You were listening to a discussion on India's presidential declaration on maritime security at UN Security Council. The participants were Yogendra Kumar, former ambassador, and Simran Sodhi, journalist. This program was produced and presented by the News Services Division of All India Radio. You can listen to it on our mobile app, News on AIR. This program is also available on our YouTube channel, News on AIR Official. You may email your opinion about this program at airnsdtalks@gmail.com.